In the early hours of Monday, April 25, 2011, 11 firefighters rushed to a blazing house in Redhill, a quiet village nestled in Nottinghamshire. Among the chaos, 14-year-old Daniel Bartlam emerged as a fleeting hero, saving his younger brother Dominic and the family dog from the roaring inferno that threatened to consume them all. But the family's tragedy was far from over. Jacqueline Bartlam, the children's mother, was found lifeless amid the flames. Forensic examination revealed a chilling truth: she had died before the fire even began, beaten to death with a hammer. Jacqueline's murder cast suspicion on Daniel, who spun a remarkable tale of a masked intruder breaking in and killing his mother. Welcome to my channel. At approximately 2:00 a.m., a frantic 9999 call reported a fire at a property on Georgia Drive in Redhill, a village just 4 miles from Nottingham, deep in England's East Midlands. Fire crews arrived to find the house fully engulfed in flames, the heat fierce and unforgiving. Outside the burning home stood Daniel, aged 14, clutching his 6-year-old brother Dominic, and the family dog, visibly shaken but alive. Daniel insisted their mother Jacqueline was still inside, prompting firefighters to charge into the inferno without hesitation. They found Jacqueline in an upstairs bedroom, collapsed on the floor. She was unmistakably dead. The damage from the fire was so severe that identification would only be possible later through dental records. By late morning, police and fire investigators cordoned off the area, meticulously sifting through the charred remains of the Bartlam family home. 7 hours after the emergency call, detectives sat down with Daniel to hear his version of events. He recounted how he had been roused from sleep by a noise only to confront a masked man standing in the hallway. According to Daniel, the intruder hurled a hammer at him before fleeing into the darkness. Daniel then claimed he rushed to his mother's bedroom, where flames were already consuming the room, and found her lying unconscious, or worse. He said he fled the scene, waking his little brother Dominic and dragging him outside to safety. Defying the growing blaze, Daniel alleged he re-entered the burning house to rescue the family dog. But as the fire intensified, the stairs became impassable, forcing the boys to seek refuge at a neighbor's home, who promptly called for help. Detectives later admitted how convincingly Daniel delivered his story during initial interviews. For a brief and hopeful moment, the community hailed him as a courageous young hero. His quick thinking had undeniably saved his brother, and he had risked himself to retrieve the family pet. Yet cracks in his narrative began to appear when the autopsy report arrived. It revealed no smoke in Jacqueline's lungs, confirming she had died before the fire ever took hold. The brutal cause of death was 7 hammer blows to the head and face, fracturing her skull near where she was found. Investigators recovered a lump hammer at the scene, which Daniel claimed was the weapon the masked man had thrown at him. This seemed to close the case. A burglar, startled by Jacqueline, killed her in a panic. Then, in an attempt to cover his tracks, the intruder set fire to the house. But detectives found this scenario implausible, questioning the logic behind such a reckless act. Burglars typically avoid confrontation at all costs. They strike when homes are empty and flee immediately if disturbed. Here, someone had broken in while the family was clearly home and asleep. Moreover, valuable items like televisions and laptops remained untouched, inconsistent with a burglary motive. Suspicion deepened when the fire's origin was examined. Jacqueline's body was carefully surrounded by newspapers before being drenched in petrol and set ablaze. Evidence suggested she had been lying down, likely asleep, when attacked. This meant a masked intruder had broken in, stolen nothing, and brutally murdered a defenseless woman. He then either gathered materials to start the fire or brought them along. The investigation took an even darker turn when it was discovered the lump hammer was not the murder weapon. Jacqueline had been killed with a claw hammer, which police found hidden in Daniel's bedroom. Faced with the claw hammer evidence during interrogation, Daniel altered his story dramatically. He admitted to waking his mother in the early hours, sparking a heated argument over a missing pair of trainers. In a moment of rage fueled by years of alleged mental and physical abuse, he claimed to have struck her repeatedly with the hammer. He also confessed that Jacqueline had called him a freak during the quarrel. Despite his confessions, detectives in the Crown Prosecution Service found his claims unconvincing. 2 days after the fire, Daniel Bartlam was formally charged with murder. The following day, he appeared before Nottingham Crown Court and was remanded to a secure children's facility. With Daniel confined, the police intensified their efforts to build a watertight case against him. In the 2 weeks following the devastating fire, investigators meticulously combed through the charred remains of the Bartlam house. Hidden within the wreckage, one crucial piece of evidence would shatter the case wide open and irrevocably seal Daniel Bartlam's fate. Miraculously, Daniel's laptop had survived the inferno. Born on November 11, 1996. Daniel grew up in Nottinghamshire, raised in a seemingly comfortable middle-class family in the village of Nettlethorpe by his parents, Jacqueline and Adrian. Though no official concerns were raised during his early years, hindsight suggests that troubling signs may have been present long before the tragedy. Thanks to his father's income, Daniel attended Dogmar House, an exclusive private school in Beeston. In 2005, his younger brother Dominic was born. By then, however, Jacqueline and Adrian's marriage had collapsed, ending in divorce. The boys stayed with their mother, but maintained regular contact with their father. Each parent endorsed a different style of discipline. A family acquaintance later recalled that Adrian spoiled the boys with lavish gifts, while Jacqueline was considered the stricter parent. Yet as the investigation would reveal, this portrayal was misleading. The absence of firm boundaries played a significant role in the unraveling of this family. The divorce marked a profound shift in Daniel's behavior. A neighbor remembered Daniel as once lively, playing freely with other children in the street. But after his parents split, he retreated into himself, becoming withdrawn. Both boys were pulled from private school and enrolled in local community schools. While Dominic adjusted, Daniel struggled to fit in. Reports painted a bleak picture: no friends, frequent bullying, and a retreat into isolation. Daniel spent countless hours alone in his room, engrossed in video games and surfing the internet on the laptop his father had given him. For a brief period, he even maintained a YouTube channel uploading videos sporadically. In one video, he announced with excitement that he had acquired a new iMac to create better content. Despite his apparent loneliness and odd demeanor, his classmates viewed Daniel as generally normal and rational. But behind closed doors, darker behaviors were emerging. The most revealing accounts came from Simon Matters, Jacqueline's boyfriend since 2007, who witnessed Daniel's decline firsthand. In 2009, as Jacqueline prepared to move the boys to a detached house on Georgia Drive, Simon helped pack Daniel's belongings. While clearing the boys' room, Simon was struck by a foul, rancid odor. He soon uncovered the source: several plastic boxes hidden beneath the bed filled with human urine and feces. In another container, towels stained and soiled were found, used by Daniel to clean himself. The waste and towels had clearly accumulated over a long period. This meant Daniel spent hours on his bed playing on his laptop, while his own filth lay concealed beneath him. But the unsettling discoveries did not end there. Simon found pieces of Jacqueline's underwear tucked away inside Daniel's laptop bag. Items he had been searching for, unaware they had been appropriated and stored by her own son for reasons that would later become disturbingly clear. When Simon confronted Jacqueline about this, she dismissed it as harmless behavior. At home, Daniel's bullying of his younger brother Dominic escalated beyond typical sibling disputes. He would pinch and hit Dominic, exerting control in a cruel manner. Daniel seemed to relish wielding power over someone smaller and weaker. After moving into the new house, Daniel refused to accept his changed circumstances and went missing, only to be found by police walking back toward his former home. When there, he isolated himself in his room, immersed in his laptop. Initially, his focus was on gaming, but over time, his digital habits took a darker, more sinister turn. Daniel developed an obsession with horror films, often watching them on endless loops. He fixated especially on the brutal film Saw, and from around age 11 played 18-rated video games. Daniel frequented second-hand game stores and charity shops, places less likely to question his age. Simon raised concerns with Jacqueline, but she chose to downplay them. In the years before the murder, Daniel's violent tendencies escalated at home. He was known to break household items, and even attempted to attack his mother and brother, forcing Simon to step in. By age 12, Daniel had begun writing disturbing stories, originally handwritten. Simon described these writings as centered on fighting knives and killing, often accompanied by drawings of knives dripping with blood. Daniel was also accessing violent pornography from as early as 11 or 12 years old. By the time of his arrest, his online activity had escalated to frequent visits to websites focused on rape and incest, including one chillingly titled, "How to Chloroform My Little Sister." By early 2010, when Daniel was 13, concern about his behavior was growing beyond the family. In May of that year, during class at Christ the King School, Daniel shocked teachers by yelling at his school tie, calling it Fred, and accusing it of trying to harm him. This alarming episode led to him being sent to the school counselor, where he attended sessions for months thereafter. In a disturbing revelation to his counselor, Daniel disclosed experiencing relentless nightmares and a pervasive sadness. More chillingly, he confessed to hearing a voice commanding him to harm specific individuals who had angered him. This voice, he admitted, exerted near total control over his actions, making resistance nearly impossible. Despite this alarming admission, no apparent safeguarding measures were implemented to protect Daniel or those around him. Whether Jacqueline was made aware of her son's troubling declarations remains uncertain. Yet considering her dismissive reaction to concerns voiced by her partner Simon, it seems unlikely she grasped the growing danger Daniel posed. Between sessions with mental health professionals, Daniel continued to retreat deeper into a violent fantasy world, one fueled by dark and disturbing influences. His warped mind was not shaped solely by violent films and video games. Even seemingly innocuous television soap operas, programs millions watch for escapism, became twisted sources of inspiration for Daniel. To him, these shows were blueprints for committing the perfect murder. In 2010, Daniel fixated on the character John Stape from the long-running UK soap Coronation Street, whose year-long storyline involved abductions and multiple murders. This grim narrative climaxed in an episode aired on December 6th. In that episode, John Stape brutally killed Charlotte Hoyle by striking her with a hammer, then staged her death at the scene of a tram crash to disguise the murder as an accident. At the time this episode aired, Daniel had just celebrated his 14th birthday. Inspired by this violent fiction, he began to devise a chilling plan to kill his own mother. In March 2011, following a referral from his counselor, Daniel underwent a mental health assessment by Thornwood Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. The evaluation concluded that Daniel showed no signs of mental illness and was not considered a danger to himself or others. This assessment came just 6 weeks before he would commit matricide. In the weeks leading to that horrific act, Daniel began scripting his own soap opera narrative, casting himself as a cunning villain. Court documents revealed he imagined himself as a master criminal involved in rapes, assaults, and murders. Though Daniel wrote this twisted story on his laptop and attempted to delete it, police forensic teams recovered the file. This damning document became pivotal evidence in securing his conviction. Only fragments of the narrative have been released, with many sections redacted, but the crucial passage reads, Daniel Bartlam, born 1997, destined to be the longest-serving male character on the show. The sole place where his crimes could not go unpunished was within his own home, confronting his mother, Jacqueline. One night, Daniel staged a break-in, murdered his mother with a hammer, and set fire to her and their family home. Alongside this horrific blueprint, his consumption of violent media spiked dramatically. Investigations uncovered that in the weeks before the crime, Daniel visited websites related to murder, incest, and rape more than 17,000 times. By Easter weekend 2011, Daniel was poised to transform his dark fantasies into a gruesome reality. Only Daniel and Jacqueline know the full details of what transpired in the early hours of Monday, April 25, 2011. Yet one voice has been silenced forever, and the other remains silent by choice. Testimonies from friends and neighbors help reconstruct the chilling sequence of events. Easter Sunday, April 24, 2011 appeared ordinary. Daniel took his beloved dog Meg for a coat trim, mowed the lawn, and indulged in Easter eggs. A minor dispute over a broken video game was the only sign of tension that day. No one who saw Daniel sensed any anxiety or distress. On the contrary, he appeared content. Throughout the evening, Daniel remained silent, patiently awaiting the hour his mother would retire to bed, so he could execute his plan. By midnight, the household was asleep. Around 1 a.m., Daniel slipped from his bed clutching a claw hammer. Reports offer no clarity on whether he had purchased this hammer or found it within the home. Quietly, he entered Jacqueline's bedroom and stood over her as she slept. He then struck her head 7 times with the hammer, crushing her skull and disfiguring her face. It appears Jacqueline feigned waking after the first blow but was quickly subdued. Once she was lifeless, Daniel dragged her body to the floor, surrounded it with crumpled newspapers, and doused it in gasoline before igniting the flames. He placed a second hammer, a lump hammer, near the charred remains. Uncertainty remains over the origins of this second hammer and the gasoline, but these were clearly not hastily gathered items. They were stored deliberately, part of his meticulously crafted plan. After setting the fire, Daniel returned to rouse his brother Dominic, dragging him downstairs. Before fleeing, Daniel turned on the gas stove, intending to accelerate the blaze and obliterate any evidence. He then retrieved the family dog and proceeded to a neighbor's house, whose call summoned the fire brigade. Meanwhile, Dominic remained behind, distraught and screaming for their mother. Daniel maintained a calm facade, never once showing concern for Jacqueline. To neighbors who gathered, he alleged that a masked intruder had broken in. Confident in his cunning, Daniel believed he had executed the perfect crime. Yet within 48 hours, he was arrested, charged with his mother's murder, and remanded to a secure children's unit to await trial. Daniel Bartlam's trial commenced at Nottingham Crown Court in February 2012. Facing the mounting evidence, Daniel admitted to killing his mother, but insisted it had not been premeditated. He claimed a loss of control triggered by years of physical and emotional abuse inflicted by Jacqueline. On this basis, he argued for a verdict of manslaughter rather than murder. Daniel's defense crumbled under scrutiny. Throughout the 2-week trial, not a single witness painted Jacqueline in a negative light. Social services had no involvement with the family, and no one ever observed signs of abuse within their home. Jacqueline was consistently remembered as a devoted and loving mother, fully devoted to her children. The prosecution dismantled Daniel's false claims with ease, relying heavily on the damning evidence found on his computer, where he had meticulously outlined his plan and then executed it flawlessly. Daniel's calculated nature was further revealed when he placed a lump hammer beside his mother's body, attempting to mislead investigators into believing it was the murder weapon, while the real weapon remained hidden in his bedroom. The case was then adjourned to allow for mental health evaluations. On Monday, April 2, 2012, Daniel faced Mr. Justice Julian Flowers in court. Throughout the hearing, Daniel kept his head bowed, often covering his face with trembling hands, though furtive glances betrayed his attempt to watch proceedings. Mental health experts from both sides presented their findings shockingly, concluding that Daniel exhibited no psychological or psychiatric disorders. They essentially declared him mentally sound, a conclusion that raises serious doubts, as we will revisit. Reports later surfaced that Daniel had threatened another youth in the secure unit, chillingly warning he would kill them. "Like I killed my mom." Considering all evidence, Mr. Justice Flowers pronounced his sentence, noting the failed attempt to conceal the crime, as the pathologist confirmed the fatal blow came from a claw hammer, not the lump hammer left at the scene. The judge acknowledged typical teenage conflicts between Daniel and Jacqueline, but firmly rejected claims of any abuse, verbal or physical, by the mother. He condemned the murder as a grotesque, senseless act, highlighting Daniel's disturbing obsession with executing the perfect crime. The court then handed down Daniel's sentence for the murder of Jacqueline Bartlam. At just 15 years old, Daniel was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term set at 16 years. Before being led away, Daniel locked eyes with Simon Matters, Jacqueline's boyfriend and key witness, making a chilling gesture by drawing his finger across his throat. Accounting for time served, Daniel is expected to be eligible for parole in about 3 years at the age of 30. This case remains perplexing, as the motive behind Daniel Bartlam's brutal matricide has never been fully explained. Speculation runs deep, but one staggering fact is that mental health professionals had previously reported no signs of mental illness in Daniel before the murder. This assessment strikes many, including myself, as utterly implausible. Numerous experts and observers alike have noted a profound disturbance lurking beneath Daniel's facade. Before exploring that, I aim to trace how Daniel evolved into the killer he became, and examine possible reasons behind his actions. No signs of abuse, physical or verbal, were found in the household, yet certain family dynamics appear to have shaped Daniel's dangerous path. He was likely a spoiled child, accustomed to getting whatever he desired, whenever he desired. New games or gadgets came with a simple request. He attended a private school supported by ample family wealth. But then his parents divorced. This upheaval devastated Daniel, as he lost the privileged lifestyle he felt entitled to. There are signs the divorce was bitter and acrimonious. Jacqueline was effectively cut off, forced to move, and the boys lost access to their private school education. Adrian, Daniel's father, still had the means to provide luxury, but appeared to withhold support, possibly as a way to punish Jacqueline. An insightful observation from an article suggests Adrian may have poisoned Daniel's mind against his mother, blaming her for the divorce, the loss of privileges, and the move to a new school where Daniel faced bullying. Daniel's resentment was so deep, police found him wandering back toward his old school. He seemed to hold Jacqueline entirely responsible for his diminished circumstances, fueling a growing hatred. Though often described as a strict disciplinarian, evidence suggests Jacqueline's control may have been weaker than portrayed. Daniel appeared free to act without consequence. He had unrestricted internet access, purchased adult-rated games and films, and spent long hours behind closed doors. Disturbingly, Daniel reportedly soiled himself in his room, creating a foul stench that must have permeated the house. Yet Jacqueline took no action. Two possibilities arise. Either Jacqueline, like Adrian, did not enforce boundaries, permitting the children free rein, or she feared Daniel's volatile nature. Fear may have silenced her response. The evidence pointed more convincingly toward a darker explanation. It was hard to believe Jacqueline would have ignored her son, especially given that her underwear was discovered in his room, unless she feared the consequences of confronting him. Whatever the reason, Daniel seized the freedom he had and exploited it without restraint. Rather than adapting to his altered reality, he retreated into his room, brooding in silence. He resented the situation, deeply convinced he was above it all, outraged that his mother could dismantle his life so completely. Feeling utterly powerless, Daniel sought to reclaim control through an obsession with violent films and video games. He was captivated by movies like Saw, where John Kramer, a man dying of cancer, unleashes a brutal crusade to punish those he deems morally corrupt. Daniel imagined his mother trapped in Kramer's merciless snare with himself wielding the power. He pictured her torn apart, a twisted vengeance for the ruin of his own life. This violent fantasy had taken root early. Daniel had been immersed in such disturbing material since he was just 8 years old. He was undeniably drawn to the commanding presence these horror villains exuded. They held absolute power over life and death, a stark contrast to his own sense of helplessness. That helplessness, however, was entirely of his own making. Daniel sat in his room, sulking like a petulant child, refusing to take responsibility. He expected life to hand him everything without effort or struggle. At his core, Daniel longed to experience that intoxicating power. He craved the dark thrill of taking another human life. This desire became his primary motivation to transform fantasy into reality. Motivation number 2 was closely tied to the first. He planned to launch a campaign of murder. There was no doubt he intended to start with his own mother. Killing Jacqueline would allow him not only to act out his fantasies, but also to punish her for the perceived betrayal of shattering his existence. Daniel's dark interests extended beyond violence. He was drawn to pornography, using masturbation as a fleeting escape, but the violence soon merged with his sexual outlets. His consumption escalated to images and films depicting sexual violence. This disturbing pattern mirrored the violent media that had long fascinated him. He was attracted to the depiction of one person having total control over another. The man in these fantasies acted with impunity, unstoppable and unchecked. Over time, Daniel's online searches grew more depraved, including websites focused on incest. Such internet histories reveal a profound disconnect from reality about what is sexually acceptable and what arouses the offender. They illustrate deeply warped sexual attitudes. What made this case even more alarming was that Daniel held these deviant beliefs barely into his early teens. This leads us to perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the case and a likely factor in why Daniel killed his mother. Evidence suggests Daniel was using his mother's underwear in masturbation, combined with searches about rape and incest indicating sexual fantasies about her possibly involving violence. These thoughts seemed to disgust him, fueling a growing resentment toward Jacqueline. Ultimately, he killed her partly to silence these tormenting desires. This became motivation number 3. The final motivation was rooted purely in Daniel's narcissism. He craved the spotlight, the need to prove his intelligence and be the star of his own dark drama. He was obsessed with John Stape, a character from Coronation Street, a killer who outwitted everyone, murdered, and covered it up. Daniel envisioned himself as a master criminal, scripting a story where he committed rapes and murders, with only his mother standing in his way. In this imaginary narrative, he was the hero and his mother the villain. Though dubbed the Coronation Street Killer by the press, this was merely the blueprint Daniel used to plan the murder, not the root cause. His violent fantasies had been brewing long before the show's influence. Motivation 4 was all about showing off, proving his cunning by killing his mother, deceiving police, and escaping detection. This single act of brutality served multiple purposes, executed with cold, ruthless efficiency. Daniel bore no remorse or regret for smashing in his mother's skull. It was merely a fulfillment of his twisted fantasy. The complete denial by mental health professionals that anything was wrong with Daniel is staggering. Multiple reports confirm he exhibited traits of serious personality disorders. His self-absorption, belief in his superior intellect, and propensity for violence fit these diagnoses. Daniel's sense of entitlement was overwhelming. He expected to get whatever he wanted without question or resistance. His relentless hunger for power and control drove him to dominate those around him. Manipulative and callous, he showed zero remorse. His actions were devoid of guilt or conscience. This chilling portrait reveals the cold core behind Daniel's monstrous act. He was a calculated predator wielding control with ruthless precision. The story of Daniel Bartlam stands as a stark warning of how darkness festers behind a mask of normalcy. The disturbing act of Daniel defecating and urinating in his own room reveals a deeper layer of his antisocial behavior. This was not a random act, but a clear refusal to conform to even the most basic societal rules and norms. It is likely that a confrontation with his mother triggered this, perhaps over something as mundane as not flushing the toilet properly. In retaliation, Daniel chose to soil his room, a silent act of defiance that also allowed him to avoid leaving his space or facing a woman he despised. Contrary to some claims, there is no convincing evidence that Daniel was hearing voices. Reports suggest he was prone to attention-seeking, and his dramatic outburst at school fits the profile of someone desperate to be noticed. When Daniel spoke of hearing a voice compelling him to kill, it may have been a battle within himself between violent impulses and a silent plea for help. Yet it is just as plausible that he intended to shock his therapist, relishing the fear his words provoked, craving the spotlight at any cost. At the time of this recording, Daniel Bartlam has been confined for 13 years. Throughout this time, he has been subjected to various programs aimed at reducing his threat to society, but personality disorders like his remain incurable. Daniel will never develop true conscience or feel genuine remorse. Instead, he will be taught to manage his condition and navigate the outside world cautiously. Given the depth of his disturbance, it is chillingly likely that one day another equally dangerous individual will emerge driven by the same twisted fantasy of becoming the star of a perfect murder. I invite you to share your thoughts on this haunting case in the comments below. If you appreciate this content, consider supporting the channel by joining as a member. Alternatively, you can make a one-time donation through the thanks button to help keep this work alive. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.